Now we will learn about the medulla oblongata. Okay. Medulla oblongata is a very important part of the brain, specifically the brain stem. Brain stem is learned under three topics. You have a midbrain above, a pons below, and a medulla oblongata most below. The specific learning objectives or the competencies prescribed by the National Medical Council in the CBME curriculum is this. AN 58.1, Anatomy 58.1 says that a student needs to identify the external features of the medulla oblongata and also the internal features by learning the transverse sections at the level of the pyramidal decussation, sensory decussation, and the inferior olivary nucleus. Okay, these are the learning objectives, and also you have to know the cranial nerve nuclei that are emerging from the medulla oblongata and their functional groups. So what I will be focusing today will be mostly on the external features, on the gross appearance, and how to correlate that with the internal sectional anatomy. Okay, this is a kind of a heavy topic, but let us try to get a spatial understanding of this before learning deep into the medulla oblongata. So this session we will focus on correlating the external appearance with the internal sectional appearance. All right, first an overview. Suppose you look at the anterior view of the brain stem. This is the lower brain stem. Just to give you an idea, the cerebrum are two cerebral hemispheres, and you have a midbrain, pons, and a medulla, and from the medulla downwards you have the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord so extends upwards into the medulla oblongata. You can consider that the spinal cord is a continuation of the medulla oblongata. So the medulla oblongata is what you are seeing here in this picture. This long structure that you see is called medulla oblongata, and you are looking at this image, you are looking at the anterior view. This is a Gray's anatomy picture, a very old classic diagram of the anterior view of the brainstem. So this much part is what you call as the medulla, and above that what you are seeing, this is the pons. Okay, we are focusing on the medulla. On the anterior appearance, you find a anterior median fissure. This anterior median fissure was actually a continuation of the anterior median fissure of the spinal cord. That's why I said that it is an upward continuation of the spinal cord. So you can see here an anterior median fissure. This one is an anterior median fissure. I'll change the color to make it more clear. And on both sides of that fissure, you have two elevations, and these elevations are very important. They are called as pyramids. As you can see in this diagram, it is written as pyramids. Okay, pyramids. And lateral to the pyramid you have a structure, and that is called olive. So the location of the olive, that it is lateral to the pyramid, is very important. Okay, this is the view of the most important features that you see in an anterior view. And one more point that you need to know here is that though the pyramid is above, below you have an obliteration of this anterior median fissure, and that is called the pyramidal decussation. What you see here is called the pyramidal decussation. It almost looks like a lot of X's. Okay, that's why it's called decussations. Deca, the word, the decussation word arises from the word deca. Deca in Roman letter it is written as X. Okay, that's why you have a decussation. It means there are fibers that are crossing in the decussation. So that is called pyramidal decussation. Pyramidal decussation is seen in the lower part of the medulla, but the pyramid is seen in the upper part of the medulla. The olive is also seen in the upper part of the medulla. Now these are the most important features that you see in the anterior view of the medulla oblongata. But if you look at the posterior view of the medulla oblongata, this is a posterior view, also called as the dorsal view, and here the cerebellum is removed. That is very important. I hope you remember that in a sagittal section you have the brainstem was in front and the cerebellum was behind. So suppose you take out the cerebellum and you look at the brainstem from the posterior aspect. That is the appearance that you are seeing in this image. You are looking at the posterior view when the cerebellum is removed. So when you look like that, you understand that this much part, okay, this much part is the medulla oblongata. Okay, and that medulla oblongata has a lower part. This much is the lower half of the medulla oblongata, and this much is the upper half of the medulla oblongata. In the lower part, if you look over here, you can see that also this upper part, start from here, in the in the upper part of the medulla oblongata, that is called the open part of the medulla oblongata. The lower part of the medulla oblongata is called the closed part. You can see that this much part is closed, and there you can see something that looks like an opening, and after that the medulla kinds of opens up. That is called the open part of the medulla oblongata. Okay. So, this is called open part and this is called the closed part. Now, if you look at the uppermost part of the closed part, you can see two very close tubercles. Okay, two elevations. These tubercles are called the gracile tubercle. So, the gracile tubercle is seen in the upper part of the closed part of the medulla, that is almost at the mid level of the medulla, because the whole structure is called the medulla oblongata, and the mid level you will have this elevation. These elevations are seen on the dorsal aspect of the medulla. This is called the gracile tubercle. Just laterally you find two other tubercles on the lateral aspect. I will change the color to make it more evident. These blue colored ones are the cuneate tubercles. So, that is seen just lateral to it. I will clear this off to make this once more evident. These are called gracile tubercles and these are called cuneate tubercles. Okay, cuneate tubercles are quite lateral to it, and this is found at the mid level of the medulla. If you look at the upper part of the medulla, that is the open part of the medulla, what you see here is actually the floor of the fourth ventricle. Okay, this is the floor of the fourth ventricle. If you look at this gross appearance, it looks almost like a rhomboid. Okay. That is why hindbrain is called a rhombencephalon. Okay, rhombencephalon, because it appears rhombic in shape. Okay, that is diamond in shape. This appearance is the floor of the fourth ventricle, and it is the lower part of this rhomboid part that forms the part of the medulla. This much part only is the medulla. The upper part of that rhomboid is part of the pons. Okay. So, this is the dorsal aspect. It is quite more complex than when you look from the anterior aspect. Okay. So, in the dorsal view you have an open part, and in the open part actually the most medial aspect you have what is called as the hypoglossal trigons. Okay, hypoglossal trigons, and more laterally you have what is called as the vagal trigons. Okay, that is called the vagal trigons. So, most medially you have hypoglossal, a little bit laterally you have vagal area. In the closed part you have the gracile tubercle and the cuneate tubercle. So, these are the number of structures that you can enumerate on the external aspect of the medulla from the dorsal aspect as well as from the ventral aspect. Now, let us look at the sectional views of the medulla. In the sectional view you can see that this is, let me just orient you first. In this image this is anterior and this is posterior. So, in the anterior aspect you can see the anterior median fissure, and on the both sides you can see these elevations, and these elevations are called pyramids. I mentioned that before in that view. Just lateral to that you have another elevation. It is not very clear in this picture, it is an elevation. That elevation is called the olive, and the olive is formed by this structure deep to it. It is called the inferior olivary nucleus. Okay. The pyramid is actually an elevation that is found by the pyramidal tract that is deep to it. Okay. So, every elevation that you see on the outer aspect of the brain stem, there is a counterpart on the internal aspect that is causing that elevation. Okay. So, the pyramid is formed by the pyramidal tract, the olive is formed by the inferior olivary nucleus. Now, this posterior aspect, as you can see here, is the open part of the fourth of the medulla, that is the floor of the fourth ventricle. So, this is the lower aspect of the floor of the fourth ventricle. If you look at the structures here, you can see on the medial aspect you can see the hypoglossal nucleus, and on the more lateral aspect you can see the vagal nucleus. That is why it was called the hypoglossal area and the vagal area medially and laterally. And over more lateral side you can see the inferior cerebellar peduncles. Okay, that is on the more lateral aspect. So, these are the features that you see in an upper medulla section, that is a section at the level of the olives. These are the structures that you will see. Now, if you take a section at the level of the mid medulla, okay, in the mid medulla, in the anterior aspect the pyramid has grown smaller in size, but if you look at the posterior aspect, you can see two tubercles. This tubercle is you see on the dorsal aspect, on the posterior aspect, that is called the tubercle gracilis. Tubercle gracilis is formed by the nucleus gracilis. More laterally you can see the tubercle cuneatus, which is formed by the nucleus cuneatus. Okay, so, those are the features that you see in the posterior aspect in the mid level of the medulla. If you take a lower more section, you can see that there is a pyramidal decussation. This is a very, very important aspect that you see in the lower part of the medulla. Okay. So this is how you correlate the external features with the internal aspect. Now one more thing I want to to bring your attention to is that in this three sections, if you look at this upper section, there is no central canal because this is the open part of the medulla. So what you are seeing here, okay, over this part, what you are seeing here is the open part of the medulla. But as you go in the lower part of the medulla, you can see a central canal getting formed. Okay, this is the central canal. That central canal is formed there because the medulla is getting closed there. So the lower part is closed and the upper part is open. Okay, so this is roughly what we need to correlate the external features with the internal aspects. Now we will have a look at this same structures in the AnaView 3D tool. Alright, what you are seeing now is the 3D tool of AnaView. As I mentioned in the previous ventricular system sessions, you can see a 3D viewport in the center, and on that side you are seeing three section views. Okay, these three sections are radiological canonical sections. One is the sagittal section that goes like this, and the next is an axial section that goes like this, or the horizontal section, and next is the coronal section that goes like this, a plane going like this. So you can move these planes, and here in this 3D viewport you can see a 3D model that is being generated by segmenting different parts of the brain. For example, here what is visualized is the brain stem, and this tool gives you the flexibility to rotate this in any direction or a view that you want, and you can also move these planes. Okay, you can zoom in and you can move these planes to look at how these structures will appear when you cut through that plane in a sectional view. So this will help you to correlate the three-dimensional appearance with a sectional view. You can also remove the planes like this and see the 3D tool as such. Okay, so first in that order of how we saw the brainstem, the external features and the internal features first, in that order itself, let us have a look at this 3D model first. What you see here is the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a long cylinder, and you can see in the upper part of the spinal cord it is forming an oblong, okay, an ovoid shape structure that is an extension, looks like a cranial extension of the spinal cord, and that is called the medulla oblongata because it is oblong in shape. So you are seeing that medulla oblongata over here. And this is the anterior view. You are now looking at the anterior view. In the anterior view you can see a median. In the anterior most point you can see a median fissure. Okay, that is the median fissure that you are seeing, and on both sides you can see an elevation. Those elevations, what is the name of that elevation? That elevation is called the pyramid. The pyramid is seen in the upper part of the medulla. So in the upper part of the medulla you have a pyramid. This elevation is formed by the pyramidal tract that is going deep to it. Just lateral to the pyramid you have these elevations which is color coded here as green, that is called the olive. Okay, you can see it is marked as olive. Whenever you click a structure, that marking will come over here. Okay, that is the pyramid and this is the olive. Okay, now between the pyramid and the olive there is a sulcus, there is a kind of a small depression, and after that also there is a kind of a depression. So you can see this anterior view and a more an anterolateral view and a more lateral view. Okay, you can rotate like this. Now if we look on the posterior aspect, if I turn to the posterior aspect, you can very clearly see that the medulla that you see in the anterior part is relatively there are only less number of features, but if you look at the posterior aspect you can see a big difference. In the upper part of the medulla it is opened out. You can see on the both sides this flanked structures that is diverging out like this, they are the inferior cerebellar peduncles. Okay, and this is actually the superior cerebellar peduncles, and you can make out this rhomboid shape, okay, rhombic shape that you see, and as I mentioned before, that is the floor of the fourth ventricle. You are seeing this because the cerebellum is removed over here, okay, and you are looking at the floor of the fourth ventricle. So this upper part of that rhomboid fossa that is what you call the floor of the fourth ventricle. That upper part is found by the posterior surface of the pons, and the lower part is found by the posterior surface of the upper half of the medulla. Okay, that is very important. Now in the mid level, this is the mid level of the medulla, as you can see. On the posterior aspect you can see elevations, two elevations. Remember that this is seen in the mid level in contrast to where you see the pyramid. The pyramid was in the upper level of the medulla, but these elevations are called the tubercle gracilis and the tubercle cuneatus. We mentioned that before. So they are seen at the mid level, okay, at the mid level of the medulla. So these are the structures that you see in the external aspect. You understand that this is the floor of the fourth ventricle lower half, and as I said before, this area is where you have the hypoglossal trigon, and more laterally you have the vagal trigon. Okay, those structures are what you see in the floor of the fourth ventricle in an anatomy specimen. All right, now let us bring back the planes. Okay, let us bring back the planes, and I'll move this axial plane downwards into the lowermost part. You need to correlate. The great advantage of this tool is that you already learned many external features in this 3D viewport. Now what we are going to do is we have to correlate this 3D viewport appearance with what you see in the sectional image, in that axial section, especially the axial section, because axial section understanding is very important in the anatomy competency. We need to understand the three different sections of the medulla: the upper level section, that is the level of the inferior olivary nucleus; a mid level section, that is the level of the great sensory decussation; and a lower level section, that is a section at the level of the pyramidal decussation. So I will go from down up. Okay, what you are seeing here is the spinal cord. Okay, this is spinal cord. You can see it is cutting through, the axial plane is now going through the spinal cord. It's very, very clear. Now what I can do is I can move this cursor onto that point, and I can scroll it to move this upwards. You can see it is still the spinal cord, and it is going upwards into the medulla. Okay, into the medulla, and now I am in the medulla. Now it is almost in the mid level of the medulla. I am just zooming in, and I want you to focus on this area. Can you see these two elevations on the posterior aspect? Please get oriented. This is the posterior aspect and this is the anterior aspect. In the posterior aspect, you can see two elevations just close to the posterior median sulcus. Those two elevations will be named the gracile tubercles. Okay, let us correlate that with what you are seeing here. Okay, these were the gracile tubercles. We saw this earlier in that 3D model alone. This was the gracile tubercle. It was seen in the mid level of the medulla. Just lateral to that, you can see the cuneate tubercle. That is what you are seeing here. That is the cuneate tubercle. So we could correlate what you see in the three-dimensional appearance with what you see in a sectional image. Okay. Now I am climbing up the sections. Okay, bringing the sections upwards. You can see it is cutting now through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Inferior cerebellar peduncle, as I told before, it was flanking both sides of that lower part of that rhomboid fossa. It was flanking like this. So that is the structure that is cutting like this. So in a sectional view, you will see the inferior cerebellar peduncle located over here. Okay, this is found on the lateral part of the medulla. This is quite important because you know that the clinical importance of all this is that in a lateral medullary syndrome, you can have affliction of the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Among all the structures that are afflicted, inferior cerebellar peduncle is also affected. So you can see that inferior cerebellar peduncle is located on the lateral aspect of the medulla, right? Okay, now I am climbing up now almost in the upper level of the medulla. You can see in the upper level of the medulla, I will turn this to the frontal view, and I will move this the coronal section more backwards to make it more visible. You can see now that the plane is now cutting through the upper part of the medulla. Okay, that was the upper part of the medulla. I will bring it downwards to make it more clear, and I will turn this away. You can see the upper part of the medulla is this, and I am bringing that plane back there, and you can see in the midline section you can see a ventral median fissure. That is the ventral median fissure in the midline, and on both sides you can see the pyramids. So the pyramids are located on both sides. The blue structure, what you see here in that section, that is on both sides of the anterior median fissure. And the next elevation that you see is the olive. The olive is seen just lateral to it. Okay, these two sets of elevations that you see on the anterior aspect is found by this. Okay, all this are very clear. Now one advantage of this tool again is that you can remove these colors off, and you can see how this actually appears in an MRI. This is an MRI image, and when you look at this MRI image, you can understand that these elevations are the pyramids, and if you are not very clear what these structures are, you can bring back the colors. That will bring back the segmentation, and you can look at this and you can understand that okay, these are the pyramids and laterally you have the olives. So you can get that correlation of a plain MRI image and correlate that with the 3D appearance, and understand that this is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, just confirm this is the inferior cerebral epidural, this is the olive, and this is the pyramid, and you can remove that colors and try to identify that by yourself, and this enables you to understand that radiological anatomy appearance with the gross anatomy appearance that you see in a dissection hall. Okay, so this is the advantage of this tool. You can remove these colors if you want, and you can try to identify the structures that are seen here. Now I will again remove those planes. Okay, I will remove these planes again and bring back this 3D tool into that 3D viewport alone, and if I kind of select this medulla tegmentum, and I can reduce the opacity. This is the set opacity of it. I can reduce the opacity, and I can see through this something like a glassy structure. I can see all the structures above it. Okay, through it I can see that the pyramid and the olive is located in the anterior aspect of it. The inferior cerebral epidural is located on the posterior lateral aspect. In the mid medulla you can see this. Okay, all these things are very clear when you make it a less transparent structure. If I take the olive elevation and I reduce the transparency of that olive, I can see that inside that olive there is an inferior olivary nucleus. This is the inferior olivary nucleus. Okay, this structure, it is a crumpled bag appearing nucleus. Okay, it is well seen in high Tesla, high resolution MRI images, the inferior olivary nucleus. So there is actually this inferior olivary nucleus that is creating this olive elevation on the outside. So this tool actually gives you much flexibility to understand spatial orientation. You can just rotate this in many views, and you can correlate what is seen on the external aspect with the internal aspect, and you can also take convenient sections in the planes that you wish, and you can correlate this external appearance with this internal view. Okay. So with that we will complete the class on medulla. This is roughly correlating the different aspects of medulla by getting a spatial orientation about the structure. Thank you.